Good afternoon, citizens. Welcome to ECW Live. Once again, I'm John Singley, your host. Today we're going to continue our series on the Mayor's Transition Report. And one of the trending topics in social media in the last couple of months has been this whole idea of economic development. A lot of exciting news about ST Engineering at the airport and other efforts to spur economic activity in the county. And what better person to bring in to talk to about that is the Transition Report Economic Development and Entrepreneurship Pillar Leader, Mr. Bryan Wyer. Bryan, thank you for joining with us.
My pleasure. Thank you, John, for having me here today. I appreciate that.
Bryan, talk a little bit about yourself. Let the viewers who don't know you know a little bit about your background, where you're from, where did you go to school?
Well, I was born and raised in Pensacola, Florida, went to Pensacola Catholic High, and I moved to the University of West Florida. I graduated from UWF and immediately moved down to Tampa, Florida for 22 years, and then came back about 6 years ago. When I came back in the area, I was involved with nonprofits, working with foundations, working with the University of West Florida, and then I received the great opportunity of being involved with the Gulf Coast Minority Chamber of Commerce.
So is it a Rays, Lightning, or Buccaneers?
I am a Buccaneer.
Okay.
And also Miami Dolphins as well, too, both of those areas.
I gotcha. Okay, so you were chosen to be on the transition team. Can you tell us a little bit about how that occurred?
Well, one night I got a phone call from Quinn Studer, and I got a phone call from Grover Robinson, and they asked me to be involved in a transition team effort. And I was just truly amazed and honored to have that opportunity. They mentioned I would be involved with the economic development and entrepreneurship area, and I thought I would be part of a team within that area, but I found out shortly that I would be the pillar leader. And I'm like, that's amazing. You pick me from a smaller chamber, someone that's new to the community, to be part of this. And I was just completely honored. My first words was, yes, I will do it. Let me know where, when, and why, and I'll be there.
So the team started its work in earnest back in late October, early November. And talk about the process. How did you develop your information?
It was truly one of the most involved processes that I've been in. I mean, Quint did a wonderful job, him and his staff, of pulling together past details, pulling together best practices from other cities. He provided us information, and he really gave us the freedom to work independently on our own to develop what works best for our individual areas, but then also provided some great timelines for us as a group so that we're all kind of on the same page. The information was amazing to gather and to work on, and just being there and being in that group was just truly inspirational.
For our audience today, if you have any questions for Bryan, please put them on your Facebook comments and pass them. We'll see them, and we'll try to get them over to you. So Bryan, once you got started, there was a series of interviews and public meetings. Tell us about that.
Well, the public meetings really was the best way to gather comments. I personally went through the process of going to other public input sessions to see what was going on. I had 3 input sessions myself, individually for my topics, in various locations across town. I did some on the east side, some on the west side, some downtown. Really a good mixture to get a really diverse perspective from our community. We also had individual meetings with some of the leadership in the mayor's office. We had meetings with some of the community leaders, some of the big organizations, and even some of the small mom and pop organizations that exist in our town.
And what did you learn from these public meetings? What are the key takeaways?
You know, I really learned from these meetings that everything's intertwined and tied in together. There were areas that were brought up in my section for economic development that truly impacted crime and safety. They impacted areas of education, and we all gained together the different synergies from our comments being placed in those areas. I really learned from the input sessions that we have a community that's very involved. I had some folks that came to every single one of my meetings. They were there in the morning, lunch, night. They traveled across town to be there, and I truly admired them for having the input. Very candid, and my point of view was tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly. Please don't hold things back. I'm not tying the comments to you. I'm just having your comments and feeding them to my report.
What do you define economic development to be on the local level here?
You know, I'm still fairly new at this game, and one of the things I told Quint and Grover about was that I kind of have fresh eyes. I'm coming back in the community here about 6 years now, and I haven't been involved in the Chamber of Commerce for over about 1.5 years. So I see things from a different perspective, from another community, and what I see about economic development is that we have great opportunities here. We have some amazing things going for our community, but now we need to hone them in and to make sure that we follow through to them. And what better time to do this during a transition of new leadership into mayor. So the timing is great, the opportunities are great, and now we got to put it to action.
Do you see economic development and entrepreneurship being first cousins, or actually linked totally together? Is it the same thing?
You know, there's quite a distinction between the two areas, but they're tied in together. Without having successful businesses and having a good economic development impact, you're not going to bring new people coming into the community. You're not going to have people starting new businesses if a strong foundation of that business is not already here. So they really are tied in together. And the good part that I really like to explain is the fact that entrepreneurs need to look to somebody for help, for mentoring, for someone to help show them some of the ropes, and that's where the existing businesses really need to help out.
Brian, you brought with us today a short little presentation we'd like to share with our audience, so I'll turn this over to you to walk us through this. And again, if you have any questions for Brian as he goes through the presentation, just put them on your Facebook comment and we'll pass them to him. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Well, the first slide here really shows the end result. This is a picture of Quint, Grover, and me with our report that we provided. We took it the last day of the report being turned in, and it's truly something that I'll remember. Me and Grover had kind of matching suits, which is kind of funny there. So I'll definitely keep this photo and cherish it. The next slide shows our scope of review. Now this was just a summary of the actual report that I had, but economic development is actually the top issue facing our city and our county at 25% and 28%. It ranked higher as far as a top issue above crime and safety, above education. People are concerned about jobs and being able to provide a living for their family. My role as president and CEO of the chamber, my role again is coming in somebody that's new with fresh eyes and being able to see things maybe from a different perspective. I'm often asked to be on boards and committees, and I always say, I don't know about this area. I have no clue in this area. But they say, Brian, you're not afraid to ask questions. I will ask a question and try to get feedback and clarity. And if I get confused, I have no problem saying, hey, stop, hold a minute. Can you just explain it to me in layman's terms? And if I can't understand it, other people in the room are probably having the same problems. So I'll be that maverick and I'll jump out and I'll ask the question first and I'll want clarification first. I don't get embarrassed about seeing things that confuse me and not being able to understand those things.
I notice in here one of your topics is my emphasis on facts. Where did you develop this focus on data as opposed to storytelling, for instance?
Oh my gosh, well, it goes back to my college days. I was kind of an introverted, maybe even a nerd you would call it. I majored in computer science, then accounting, then finally MIS. So I just based all my information on fact gathering, using management and computers together to help get things done. So I really rely on facts. When I went down to Tampa and IBM, we were very fact-based, very research-based. I managed a quality management team with Six Sigma. I did everything based on facts and criteria. I created over 1,300 SOPs for my staff to follow 24/7, 365, so that if a problem happened, they can help get it resolved. And then if my SOP didn't work, we would revise it and communicate out the new process so it wouldn't happen a second time. So I'm very big in finding facts, gathering data, and helping to take that data and explain it in an easy way that anyone can understand.
Well, we'll let you continue with your presentation
Sure.
here.
The next slide shows the key observations. And this, I'll just go through this really quickly, but observations that we noticed, I've heard through numerous different people that we want to improve the line of communications that we have. Not saying that we're bad in the past, but we definitely want to have clear lines of communication. And this is a good time to do it with a transition time period. We want to provide timely feedback to citizens. And this is an area where many citizens mentioned the feedback was not timely, but from checking with the departments, there was reason why it may not have been timely. So it's understanding the other perspective to know that timeliness really is very variable depending on who you are. So we need to really look at a way of explaining what timely is, and then making sure that we have that in place. The third item was strategic master plans for the airport and the port should be available, and not only available but promoted to the community. If you create this great master plan for the airport and the port and you put it somewhere in a file or a location or a folder that people can't find easily, it's not no value. You got to put it in a place that's transparent and open. And Quint and Grover truly believe in transparency. Our meetings that we had were very transparent. The details were everywhere. Public records. We didn't have to do sunshine law, but we did to ensure that everyone knew what was going on to the best of our ability.
I was really impressed with with the mayor and the transition team's use of live streaming
Yes.
for many of these activities. I've often said to my friends that I would say half our population nowadays depend on social media for their information to make decisions, particularly the millennials and the Generation X's, the 45s and down. Not that many of them spend much time with traditional media, so I thought that using the live streaming on the various Facebooks and YouTubes, I thought that was smart.
Yes.
And it reflects well on the idea about transparency. So,
and I truly agree with that as well. And just that's why the value you're adding here, your podcast, being able to do this is great, because it's going to reach more people than we would through other avenues and other means. So I do applaud all your work, John, with that. And I'll share a name. Teresa Hill does an amazing job of pulling together Facebook Lives and putting things online that helps out. So thank you, Teresa and John, for doing this.
oh, you're very welcome. So, once you collected the data and the public input, what was next in this process?
Well, during the next process, it can be overwhelming. So what I did at one of the meetings to make it a little fun is this next slide: how to improve your city, one recommendation at a time. So I brought to one of the meetings this cake, and I bought individual cupcakes for each of the area leaders to see. And the whole thought process behind this is that this is a really big task we were undertaking, but we had to divide it up into smaller pieces to get it accomplished. And this cake here was kind of from the whole theme of how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time.
Right.
And I just laid off of that theme to make this work for us. I didn't want to use an elephant because of political reasons, so I just made it a cake with recommendations instead. The other area that we had here was recommendations that were listed. Can I cover these now? Or?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
Recommendations. Number 1, to adopt the covenant of the community.
Let's talk for a minute about that.
Yes,
I
sir.
recall when Mr. Studer approached the county council back during the winter. I think it had to do with the development of the new jail process and other county contracts.
Yes.
And there was a spirited debate on the Board of County Commissioners about this. And I remember now Chairman Luman May was a big proponent of this. Could you talk a little bit more about the covenant for the community?
Well, this is something that Quentin Studer, from my knowledge, now I'll be sharing with my impression of it, from Quentin Studer helped to develop this covenant with the projects that he was working on, where he wanted to have 70% local participation. When you say 70% local participation, this also includes some of the minority groups, some of the diverse groups involved with it. So this is a way to help ensure that some of the contracts, some of the bids are having a local focus. And by having a local focus that represents the community, you have more minority participation as well.
So this is an idea that a rising tide should lift all boats.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, that's an old saying. Then you talked about increased awareness of the one-stop development. Now, this was something in the report that I wasn't aware of. A lot of things I'm not aware of, but
Yes.
that the city has an economic development department. And reading your report, you think that more people should be, your recommendation was that it would benefit economic development for all the citizens in the city if they understood this a little bit better.
And they increased the awareness. I mean, this was taking place. I wasn't aware of it being a Chamber of Commerce president until I started meeting with Rebecca Ferguson, who is that economic development department. She's a person of one in that department. You call it a department, but she's one person. And when we reviewed all the tasks, all the things that she's involved in, I was completely amazed at all the things that's fallen under her window. So I think we really need to increase that awareness to make sure people know about it, but they all start attending and they be there. Kind of like I mentioned earlier about the reports for the airport and for the Port of Pensacola. If you have a great thing going on but no one knows about it, it really isn't adding value. So we really need to increase the awareness of this and have it be more promoted in our community.
What were some of the other recommendations you made?
There's one, the third item here was clearly define the functions of the city's economic development department. That's hand in hand with the awareness mentioned earlier. Rebecca does an amazing job, in my opinion, as far as what she does for the city, but we really need to help define some of her roles more clearly and ensure that all the areas that she covered are properly allocated with resources.
And finally, in the report, you talk about startup fairs. This really caught my attention. Let's talk about that. What do you mean by startup fairs?
It'll be similar to the one-stop development area, but it's focused on new businesses. This is the entrepreneur side of the whole mission that we undertook. The ability for people that are coming in with an ideal, with a dream or a passion. The best business owners are ones that have a really strong passion and want to do something, but they also need the background. They need the logistics to understand what they're undertaking. And the one-stop kind of a startup fair that gives them the ability to have those questions answered, to know whether their proof of concept really is good and valuable towards their mission, and then get the help along the way to become a successful business. So if we want to have entrepreneurship being a big part of our community, we really need to find a way to help out those young, new people coming into the area.
Yeah, we have a big story on social media recently was the retired teacher who started a restaurant over in East Hill and quickly found herself over her head business-wise,
yes,
even though she had a popular product. But she said, you know, this is the type of effort. You love to see all these flowers blooming, but you have to be careful, and having a mentorship program or some resource that you can fall back on. What kind of reaction have you gotten from the lending communities and the others regarding this?
Well, one point also about that business owner that started up, there's statistics out there to say that 95% of all businesses would fail within 5 years, and 50% of them may fall within the first year. And that's because there's passion, it's because there's a desire to do this, but unless you can manage your books properly, unless you know your marketing, unless you can know how to balance your resources, it's really tough to run a business just only on passion. You've got to have logistics in place to make that happen. As far as the feedback, I've just been given open arms from our community about what we have presented. I tried in my report to cover all the comments that I could and collect it all and then condense it down to this report format, but I captured almost every comment that I could in an Excel spreadsheet that I had together of what people said about different areas, and use that information to feed into this report. So I've heard great feedback. I haven't heard that we missed any major areas, and if we do, we definitely want to make that part of the mayor's suggestion going forward.
In your presentation here, was there a final statement or a system? I think it was a measurement,
yes,
the metrics associated with any program. You only get what you evaluate. Talk a little bit about that.
This one is really near and dear to my heart, to be honest with you, because when I looked around to find out what kind of metrics are involved in economic development, many of the teams and resources around our area developed their own, but there really wasn't a consensus I saw of what 2 or 3 criteria were the same across a lot of the different areas. So do you look at business licenses started? Do you look at the different value for property? There's just numerous different ways to track it, and if we don't put together a list of what those things are and at least agree in concept that these should be tracked and we monitor them, then it's difficult to say how successful we really are. So we have to create this tools that we agree upon. Maybe have town halls, maybe have public input sessions to kind of gather the feedback and have a source create these that we can agree upon our measurements that we use, and then once it's in place, make sure we update it, and we do periodically go by and make sure that this is being followed, this is being done. The mayor at one time mentioned he'd like to have a checklist for this report that you can look at and check off the boxes as we do them, and that's a very simple concept that will show you where you're at in the whole process and where you've been and what you need to do going forward. So it's really valuable to make sure we have those protocols in place, those measurements, and then update them as needed.
There's a clear line, though, between effort and effectiveness.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Definitely correct.
Yeah, as a military officer, that's drummed into your head when you put your first evaluation report input in there and said, well, I did all these things, and the boss will always look at you and say, well, how well did you do them? Right, you know? So anyway, I just bring that up. So Brian, the sum total for the citizens, they can find this report online. I just Google it up, City of Pensacola Transition Report. It's all there, the appendices, and you say you had a spreadsheet somewhere in the
yes, and I'll verify that's part of it, and if not, I'll see about adding it to there if we need to.
Right. So we really appreciate, speaking for many of the citizens, if not all of them, your energy and effort that you put into this, and I'm sure the mayor does too.
Yes.
because I think it's going to help us all be a better city. One final question, if I may, to ask you a little bit about, is there a big difference between, some people will say that economic development should focus first on local small businesses, that the data nationally says that the greatest job growth comes from expanding local existing businesses.
Yes.
And then we have others who say, but we've got to plant the corn before the crops grow, so we've got to incentivize businesses to locate here.
Right.
Is this two separate ideas, or are they linked somehow?
They really need to be blended together. And I read the same article saying, what do you focus on, tourism or focus on your local businesses? And people say, focus on your local businesses first, and you make it a great place to live, then tourists will come to see you. And that's kind of the philosophy that I follow myself personally, that if you put all your money towards tourism first, and they come here and have a bad experience, or businesses aren't doing well, then you kind of chase tourists away as far as being involved in the area and coming to be here. So I think you focus on your local businesses, you support them, you help them out, you focus on the startup businesses, and things will grow from that. It's my belief personally.
Bryan Wyer, the CEO and chairman of the Gulf Coast Minority Chamber of Commerce, has been our guest today, talking about his efforts as the member of the mayor's transition team. So Bryan, thank you. We really are appreciative of you coming down and talking with us.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it.
And best of luck to all of you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for your help.
So citizens, thank you for joining with us. Until next time, this is John Singley for ECW Live, and Teresa Hill, of course, back behind the cameras, making us all look and sound good. Take good care.
Thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome.